It's day 17. I'm standing on a street corner in a city I've lived in for 8 years, and I am completely, utterly lost. My phone, my map to the world is gone. I can't look up directions. I can't call an Uber. I can't even text a friend to ask for help because their number was stored in some digital cloud I torched 2 weeks ago. The sun is setting, and this primal panic starts crawling up my spine. It's a feeling I haven't had since I was a kid. The world once so familiar and easy has suddenly become alien territory. In that moment, I wasn't just without my phone. It felt like I was without a part of my brain. And I had 73 more days of this to go. You ever get that feeling that you're being watched? Not in some paranoid tinfoil hat way. I mean in a quiet, constant digital way. The feeling that every click, every search, every late night scroll is being logged, analyzed, and filed away. Building a version of you that exists completely outside of your own body. A digital ghost pieced together from scraps of data that knows your habits better than you do. It knows what you want to buy, who you want to talk to, what will make you angry, and what will make you laugh. And that digital ghost, it follows you everywhere. I used to think this was just the price of admission for modern life. A small tax on convenience. But over time, that feeling went from a mild annoyance to a heavy weight. I felt cluttered, overstimulated. I was being defined by algorithms I couldn't see and rules I never agreed to. My life was just this constant stream of notifications, targeted ads, and the silent pressure of 1,000 online connections. I was performing, not living. And I started to wonder what would happen if I just stopped? What if I could pull the emergency brake? What if I could unplug, not just from an app, but from the entire system? This is the story of how I tried to do just that. It's about what happens when you decide to erase your digital footprint and become, for all intents and purposes, a ghost. This wasn't just a social media detox. This was a radical act of disappearance. A 90-day journey into the quiet, the inconvenient, and the terrifyingly beautiful reality of a life lived completely offline. It started as an experiment, but it ended up rewiring my brain and changing my whole definition of what it means to be connected. What would you be most terrified to lose if you had to delete your entire digital life right now? Your photos, your connections, or the version of yourself you've built online? The idea didn't hit me like a lightning bolt. It was more of a slow burn, a creeping dissatisfaction that grew over years. It was the phantom buzz in my pocket, the compulsive need to check emails that were never urgent, the endless scroll through curated lives that made my own feel less. I read a study that said something like 61% of people feel addicted to the internet and their screens. And I thought, yep, that's me. My attention span was shot. My sleep was a mess thanks to late night blue light. And my anxiety was just this low, constant hum in the background of everything. But it wasn't just about social media, even though the constant comparison and need for validation was exhausting. It was the whole digital ecosystem we've built around ourselves. An ecosystem run by an industry most of us know nothing about, data brokerage. Before I started all this, I did some research, and honestly, what I found was chilling. Uh, there are over 5,000 companies out there whose entire business is to collect, analyze, and sell our personal information, mostly without us even knowing. These data brokers create these creepily detailed profiles on us. They grab info from public records, sure, but they also get it from our search trees, the websites we visit, the ads we click. They track our location through our phones, they know what we buy from loyalty cards, and they even scoop up health information from our Fitbits and pharmacy purchases. They know our politics, our religion, our personalities. This data is then sold to advertisers, insurance companies, employers, pretty much anyone willing to pay for it. The whole industry is a multi-hundred-billion-dollar machine, expected to be worth nearly $434 billion by 2025, and our lives are the raw material. Realizing that this invisible architecture was shaping my reality was the last straw. The ads I saw, the news I read, it was all being filtered through this lens of my data ghost. I wasn't just a consumer. I was the product. When did you first realize that your digital habits weren't serving you anymore? And what was that moment of clarity that made you think something has to change? My desire to disconnect turned into a mission. I didn't just want a detox, I wanted a full on exorcism. I had to see if it was even possible to reclaim my identity from the system. So I made a decision. I would try to completely disappear from the digital world for 90 days. I would become a ghost. The rules I set for myself had to be strict. No half measures. Rule 1, total digital evacuation. This meant deleting all social media, not deactivating, permanently deleting. Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, LinkedIn, all of it. Every post, picture, and connection gone. Rule 2, email blackout. I'd delete my main email accounts. This one was terrifying. My email was the key to my entire digital life from banking to subscriptions. Rule 3, data broker scrub. I'd use data removal services to send takedown requests to the big data brokers, basically asking them to please erase the file they had on me. This was the deep clean. Rule 4, analog living. For 90 days, I'd live like it was 1995. No smartphone. I bought a cheap flip phone that could only make calls and send basic texts. No GPS. I'd use paper maps. No online banking. I'd have to physically go to the bank. No streaming. No online shopping. No food delivery. Cash only, as much as possible to stop creating new data trails. Rule 5, inform the inner circle. I knew I couldn't just vanish without scaring the hell out of people. I told my immediate family and two close friends what I was doing and gave them my new flip phone number for true emergencies only. To everyone else, I would simply fade away. This was it. It felt both completely insane and absolutely necessary. I was stepping off the grid to find out what life was like without a digital safety net. I was terrified of the isolation, the inconvenience, the sheer boredom, but I was more terrified of continuing to live a life that felt like a performance for an algorithm. The day I began, I took one last look at my smartphone, that sleek black rectangle holding a decade of my life, and I powered it down for the last time. The screen went dark, and I was on my own. If you had to choose just one digital platform or service to give up forever, which one would terrify you the most to lose? And what does that fear tell you about how dependent you've become? The first day felt like a weird holiday. I had this rebellious sense of freedom as I tore down my digital life. Deleting Instagram was a jolt. A decade of photos and memories gone with a click. Facebook was next. A tangled web of friendships I severed without ceremony. Each deletion felt like snipping another invisible string, tethering me to the world. It was surprisingly easy. A few clicks, a confirmation, and poof. The harder part was the administrative nightmare. I spent out hours on the phone with customer service, closing accounts. I filled out tedious forms for data removal services, sending my identity out into the void one last time, hoping to erase it. It's a strange paradox. To erase yourself online, you have to get really, really online for one last furious session. And even then, you learn that true erasure is a myth. Search engine caches, data backups, things other people have shared. It lingers. I wasn't really deleting my past, I was just trying to bury it. By day 3, the novelty was gone, and the reality of the void hit me. My brain, so used to a constant drip feed of information, was in open revolt. The first thing I noticed was the silence. The house was just quiet. No dings, no pings, no vibrations. My thumb would twitch, reaching for a phone that wasn't there. I paced my apartment like a caged animal. I opened the fridge 10 times in an hour, not because I was hungry, but because my brain was desperate for something to do. This was withdrawal, and it was physical. You read about studies on social media withdrawal causing anxiety, increased heart rate. I was feeling it. I was restless, irritable, and couldn't focus. The world felt muted, slow, and profoundly boring. The fear of missing out, FOMO, was this constant, gnawing presence. What was happening in the world? What were my friends up to? Did someone email me something important? My mind was a storm of anxieties I could no longer soothe with a quick scroll. What's the longest you've gone without checking your phone, and what physical sensations or emotions did you experience during that time? Just getting through the day became a huge challenge. I had a doctor's appointment in a part of town I barely knew. Without Google Maps, I had to dig an ancient street atlas out of a closet. I spent 20 minutes tracing the route with my finger, feeling like a cartographer from a forgotten time. I got lost. Twice. A 20-minute drive took over an hour. When I finally stumbled in, flustered and late, the receptionist asked me to confirm my appointment via an email they'd sent. I had to explain that I didn't have email anymore. She looked at me like I had just admitted to living in a cave. Then the loneliness started to creep in. Not the feeling of being alone. I like being alone. This was the feeling of being disconnected. My social life had been built on digital tools. Casual check ins were texts, plans were made in group chats, parties were organized on Facebook. Without these, I was on an island. I found out a good friend got engaged when I ran into someone at the grocery store a week after it happened. Um, the news had been all over social media, a digital party I wasn't invited to. The sting of being left out was sharp, even though I knew it was my own fault. Those first few weeks were a battle against myself. My brain was a machine built for a world I'd left behind. It craved the dopamine hit of a notification, the easy distraction of a feed, the instant answer to any question. Stripped of its fuel, my mind felt broken. There were moments of real despair where I thought I'd made a terrible mistake. I felt isolated, anxious, and so bored. I had successfully become a ghost, but I was starting to realize that being a ghost means haunting a world you can no longer touch. Think about a time when you felt completely disconnected from your social circle. What was happening in your life, and how did that isolation change the way you saw your relationships? Around the start of the second month, something changed. The constant, nagging anxiety of the withdrawal began to fade, replaced by a strange and unfamiliar calm. The war in my head was ending, not with a victory, but with a quiet truce. My brain, finally realizing its old tricks weren't getting a reward, slowly started to form new pathways. The boredom that had felt like torture started to feel like something else. Space. With no digital world to escape into, I had to be present in the physical one. I started noticing things I hadn't in years. The way the light hit the buildings on my street in the afternoon, the specific shade of green on new leaves in the park, the intricate cracks in the sidewalk. My world, which had felt so gray, was slowly getting its color back. I had to find new ways to fill the time. I picked up books I'd bought years ago and never touched. I started cooking elaborate meals, not from online recipes, but from actual physical cookbooks with stained pages. The simple act of following a recipe, measuring, chopping, waiting, was a kind of mindfulness I hadn't expected. One of the biggest changes was the return of my attention span. Before this, I could barely get through an article without clicking away. I'd watch movies while scrolling on my phone, half present in two places at once. Now I could read for hours. I could watch a film and get completely lost in it. My focus, once a scattered mess, was becoming a sharp, clear beam. You read about how a digital detox can improve your focus, but feeling it happen is something else entirely. When was the last time you felt completely absorbed in something without the urge to check your phone or multitask? And what was that experience like for you? How I dealt with people changed dramatically. Without the crutch of texting, I had to be intentional. If I wanted to see a friend, I had to call them on my flip phone and make a real plan. No, I'll text you when I'm leaving. This led to fewer but way more meaningful hangouts. When I was with someone, I was with them. There was no phone on the table, no notifications pulling my attention away. We just talked. I found my conversations getting deeper. I was a better listener because there was nothing else to do but listen. A turning point came on day 47. I was sitting in a park reading when I realized an hour had passed in what felt like minutes. I hadn't felt bored. I hadn't felt anxious. I hadn't wondered what was happening online. I just felt content. It was a profound moment of freedom. The digital leash that had tied me up for so long had finally snapped. I wasn't a ghost haunting the edges of the digital world anymore. I was a person living fully in the physical one. This period was also about deep self reflection. When you don't have likes and comments giving you external validation, you're forced to look inward for your sense of self worth. It was uncomfortable at first. I had to face the parts of me that craved approval, the parts that performed for an audience. My old goals were tied to digital benchmarks, career moves that would look good on LinkedIn, vacations that would look good on Instagram. Now I started asking what I actually wanted, separate from how other people would see it. I started journaling, filling notebooks with thoughts. I started taking long walks with no destination, just to move and think. I was building a new routine, a new identity, one based on my own values, not external metrics. The quiet that had once been terrifying was now a source of clarity. I was learning to be alone without being lonely. And in doing so, I was finally getting to know myself again. How much of what you share online is truly for yourself versus for the reaction or validation you hope to get from others? And what would you do differently if no one was watching? The final month felt like I was living in a different dimension. The struggle was over. The transition was complete. This wasn't an experiment I was suffering through anymore. It was just my life. I had adapted, and the analog world now felt more natural than the digital one I'd left. My daily routines were peaceful. I woke up with the sun, not a smartphone alarm. My mornings were for reading and coffee, not scrolling through a feed of outrage and ads. My mind was clear. The low-grade hum of anxiety that had been the soundtrack to my life for years was gone. In its place was a quiet confidence. My relationships with the few people in my emergency circle got so much deeper. My parents, who were worried at first, started to enjoy our scheduled weekly calls. Our conversations were longer because they weren't competing with notifications on my end. I visited a friend who lived a few hours away. Instead of texting back and forth, we made a plan a week in advance. I took a train, navigating with a printed map. The whole weekend was free of digital distractions, and we connected on a level that felt rare and precious. I learned to trust my own brain again. Without a search engine to answer every dumb question, I had to rely on my own knowledge or just be okay with not knowing. This was surprisingly liberating. The need to have an immediate answer for everything is a modern anxiety. Learning to live with the questions, to let curiosity linger, was a forgotten skill I was happy to rediscover. What's something you used to know how to do without technology that you've completely forgotten? And how would your life change if you had to rely on those old skills again? The world also felt more human. I made small talk with the bank teller, the grocery store cashier, the librarian. These were the tiny, everyday interactions that digital convenience had slowly been chipping away at. I was seeing the humanity in the people around me, not just seeing them as obstacles in the mission of my day. And financially, living on cash was a revelation. When you have to hand over physical money for something, you feel its value in a way that tapping a card or clicking buy now just can't match. I was spending less because every purchase was a conscious, tangible decision. Of course, it wasn't a utopia. There were still frustrating moments. Trying to book a flight without the internet was a ridiculous ordeal that involved a long phone call and a trip to a travel agent I was shocked still existed. I missed the convenience of instantly sharing a funny moment with a friend across the country. I missed having every song ever recorded at my fingertips. But these were small prices to pay for the huge gains. I was sleeping better, I was less stressed, and I had a stronger sense of who I was. The experiment had forced me to build a life based on tangible experiences and real connections, not virtual ones. I set out to become a ghost, to erase myself. But in the process of disappearing, I found a more solid, more authentic version of myself than I'd ever known. If you could only keep 3 digital conveniences in your life and had to give up everything else, which 3 would you choose? And why do those specific things feel essential to who you are? Day 91 arrived with a weird mix of excitement and dread. Time to go back. The experiment was over. I held my old smartphone in my hand. It felt alien, like a glossy, useless rock. Powering it on felt like opening a door I had fought so hard to close. The screen lit up, and the floodgates opened. Hundreds of notifications, texts, social media alerts from accounts I thought were dead, breaking news, and an avalanche of emails. It was a digital scream that was physically jarring. My calm, quiet world was shattered in a second. I felt my heart rate spike, that familiar anxiety returning like an old, unwelcome friend. I spent the first few hours just cleaning up the mess, unsubscribing from mailing lists, deleting apps, trying to sort through 3 months of digital noise. It was overwhelming, and it cemented the most important lesson I'd learned. I could not go back to the way things were. Look, the point of this wasn't to become a hermit for the rest of my life. It was to take a step back, figure things out, and then return with a new perspective. I had to decide what to let back into my life and what to leave behind. So I made some new rules for myself, and this time they were non-negotiable. First, the smartphone is not a body part. It would now have a home in my apartment, on a charging dock in the living room. It's not allowed in the bedroom. My sleep is too important. I turned off almost all notifications. No pings, no buzzes, no red dots begging for my attention. Second, social media is a tool, not a place to live. I decided to create one new private account on a single platform to keep in touch with faraway friends and family. The app would not be on my phone. I would only check it on my computer for a limited time each week. No more mindless scrolling. No more performing. Third, my digital life had to be intentional. I would be ruthless about who and what I allowed into my digital space. Email is for essentials only. My online time would have a purpose, whether it was work, research, or talking to someone I cared about. The biggest change, though, was internal. Those 90 days gave me a new baseline for what my mind should feel like. I now know what real quiet feels like. I know what deep focus feels like. And I can now instantly recognize when the digital world starts to chip away at that. I've gained a kind of mental immunity. I can exist in the digital world without being consumed by it. What boundaries have you tried to set with technology in your life? And what made it hard to stick to them when the convenience and habit pulled you back in? We're told we live in the age of information, but for a lot of us, it feels more like the age of interruption. We're constantly pulled in 1,000 directions. Our attention is fractured and our minds are cluttered. The promise of connection has somehow led to a feeling of being profoundly alone. My 90-day journey into the digital void started as a desperate attempt to hit reset. I wanted to disappear. But what I found in that silence, in that inconvenience, in that boredom, wasn't an absence. It was a presence. It was the presence of my own thoughts, clear and uninterrupted. The presence of the people right in front of me, in their full, undivided humanity. The presence of the real, tangible world in all its subtle, beautiful detail. I didn't escape the world. I found it again. This experiment taught me that we have more control than we think. We can be intentional. We can set boundaries. We don't have to be passive consumers of the digital world. We can be architects of our own lives. Erasing my digital footprint wasn't about rejecting technology. It was about reclaiming my relationship with it. It was about making it a tool that I use rather than a tool that uses me. I went looking for a ghost, and in the end, I found myself. What version of yourself do you think you discover if you stripped away all the digital noise and distractions? Would that person be someone you'd want to spend time with? So I'm genuinely curious. What's your relationship with the digital world like? Have you ever tried a detox, even for a day? What are the biggest pressures you feel from being constantly online? Share your stories and your thoughts in the comments below. Let's talk about how we can all live a little more intentionally. And if you found this journey interesting and want to see more experiments like this, make sure to subscribe and hit that notification bell. Thanks for watching.